A few years ago, I had a very startling encounter in these woods. I was practicing walking quietly, and I was also emptying my mind, as in I wasn't having any conversations with myself. It was quite easy to do with practice. And what startled me was about 9 or 10 deer, and I'd managed to walk within 3 feet of them, and they were all sat in a circle in the middle of the forest, and I basically almost stumbled over the deer, and they leapt up out of the undergrowth. They were just as startled as I was and ran off in all different directions. It was quite a unnerving moment. They were quite large animals, and they move very quickly when they're frightened. And I often wondered how I managed to get so close to a group of deer. Well, obviously I was being quiet within and without. Also, the wind was probably blowing in the right direction, so they couldn't smell me. So one of the fun things to do with this Qigong, one of the fun things I like to do, is practice stalking deer and other animals out in the forest. You see, if you're lost in thought, the animal can actually feel your thoughts as you walk into the forest. Not only can they smell you and sense vibration, and they've got very good hearing, but they can sense that change in consciousness. And this would also happen to you if you were to spend a lot of time by yourself in the forest. What will start to happen to you is that you'll begin to know who you are. You'll find your own silence, and you'll find an emptiness. It'll just arise naturally within, partly to do with the Schumann resonance, and partly to do with the spontaneity of the forest, if you know how to use that correctly. So what can happen then when you find yourself in the forest? And it's always easier to find yourself away from other people, because we have an electromagnetic field around us. I've mentioned this before. It can actually be measured up to a distance of 30 feet. So when you're sat in your living room doing your yoga or your meditation, what's the mental state of your neighbours? You know, people are strung out at the moment. There's all kinds of crazy things going on in the world. I highly recommend even getting away from your neighbours if you can, and coming into a forest and really practice being alone in the forest, and you will find yourself eventually. So when you find your own silence in the forest, then something quite interesting happens. You kind of key into the animals in the forest. You'll find that you'll just turn your head and there'll be a bird or a squirrel looking at you from a tree. Or you'll turn your head that way and there'll be an insect looking at you. Or you'll look up and there's an eagle looking down at you. Or you suddenly look behind because there's a rabbit watching you. And you start to get into the consciousness of nature, because we are an aspect of nature. Or we're supposed to be an aspect of nature. Our society tries to take us away from nature as much as possible, because people who know how to live in nature are independent. And part of power is to take away your independence, so you become dependent on the things that they have. But really, the strongest people are those that can be alone and who can live off the land. And they're also the most grounded as well, the farmers and the people who live and work in the land. If you come and work in a forest, you know, I'd sooner have trees for company than the stressed out career people in an office. This is a much more healthy environment. And the problem is that we all infect each other with our emotions and our madness. We beam it all out. So if you walk into a room full of people who are in a state of panic or fear, you can feel it. It's palpable within yourself. And also if you walk into a room full of people who are meditating, you'll feel that. So we do affect each other. And it's important in these stressful times to try to remain sane, try to remain calm and grounded, and not get caught up in the circus that's all around us. So how to sneak up on animals and practice meditation. This makes meditation much more fun if you come and do it out in a real place. So there's kind of a way of walking where you're trying obviously not to step on any sharp twigs because it's going to make a cracking sound. And I've probably scared most of the animals off now doing this introductory talk. But I'll put my heel down first and I'll just roll my foot. So if you can remember Thich Nhat Hanh and his Buddhist walking, come and practice it in a forest. And practice being quiet. Okay. So I'm walking very softly. Take some deep breaths and I'll become aware of my senses. It suddenly became very quiet then. One of the things you notice if you spend a lot of time in forests is the feeling of the energy changes with the seasons. So in the summertime, it feels quite vibrant and there's a lot of yang energy in the forest. And then this time of year, stood on a branch, this time of year, there's kind of a sleepy, quiet feel. There's a sense of everything going to sleep for the winter. It's very soothing. It's very calming. And I'll be quiet now so you can experience the silence of the forest. Listening for any squirrels, pheasants, or deer escaping from my presence. So just that, focusing very carefully on where I was putting my feet to make sure I didn't make a noise. I had a really nice Kruder and Dorfmeister tune going round in my head as I came into the forest. Thankfully it was a tasteful tune. That cleared, and as I focused on being quiet with my feet and just brought my awareness to how much noise I was making and trying to be quiet, I found that my mind just became quiet because I wasn't thinking about the tune or what's going on in the world at the moment. The nonsense has stopped in my head, so I've got a little bit of extra awareness now, and I've become aware of my breathing and my walking. There's a wonderful smell of damp forest here. It's particularly strong. And my attention came to my nose, what I'm smelling. My senses are beginning to come aware. I'm now being able to smell, be aware of what I'm seeing, and being aware of my breathing. I can be aware of what I'm hearing, and I'm aware of the cool air moving on my face. My awareness is increasing as I'm relaxing and moving into the forest. The Indian martial artists, they practice something called Kalaripayattu. It's from the south of India. I think it's one of the world's oldest martial arts. And they have a saying, to be the perfect fighter, the body must become all eyes. Which means that one should have complete body awareness. Now that was a fantastic spontaneous moment. It stopped me in mid-sentence, and it stopped me in mid-thought as well. This is what I keep mentioning about coming out into nature. Instead of sitting in a stuffy room next to your Wi-Fi, get out into the forest, calm your mind down, and just be entertained by it all, because it's all wonderful and spontaneous. You know, maybe a deer could jump out of the forest and scare me half to death. That would be amazing. So the question is, what scared the pheasants up this way? A fox? A deer? Or maybe some other dude making a meditation video in the forest? A large butterfly, very strange to see this time of year, just went across the road. That stopped my mind momentarily. But this is what we're looking for. Spontaneous sights, sounds, and smells. There are some midges dancing. I could watch that for hours. There's lots of leaf litter and it's becoming very difficult to be quiet. But we can enjoy the textures of sounds as well. Every footstep sounds different because the texture of the leaves are different. Attention to the smallest detail. Bird song. My attention's beginning to really become free and move around and move between my senses, between my nose, my eyes, my ears, what my body's feeling. So the practice then is to walk quietly and just observe, smell, and hear and experience things as you're walking quietly. And if you can keep your mind on all of that instead of being lost talking to yourself, you'll find that you're moving into a naturally meditative state, a more natural state of being, a state in which perhaps our ancestors spent an awful lot of time. Perhaps that's why in some ways they appear that they were cleverer than us. It wasn't maybe because they knew more things, but it was perhaps because they were able to sit and be in silence and be inspired by the silence. I also found that as I was walking across the leaves, my legs became tight as I was focusing more and concentrating and making more of an effort. And this is what happens when you meditate as well, when you sit in a stuffy room and you bring that tense attention into the mind. It actually makes the mind tense. And you can see somebody's state of mind. If we're to say, put your mind into your shoulders, either your shoulders will relax, in which case you've got a relaxed mind, or if you discover that your shoulders are more tense, is it not the tension of the mind that's looking at the shoulders and making them tense? became aware that when I heard that sound, my mind very quickly raced to identify that sound using my memory and my conditioning. So your body's always on guard for danger. I mean, there's nothing really dangerous out here in England. Maybe a stag in rutting season if you get too close to the hinds. But your body's wired to detect danger. If you came across an unusual smell, you're unconsciously going through your memory banks trying to figure out what that smell is, because in the natural world your life might depend on it. Same with sights and same with sounds. You'll pick out movement in the forest. You maybe won't see a creature if it lies still, but as soon as it moves, you'll pick it out. You see, we have the eyes of a predator. So that nervous system, constantly on guard. And that's what the body's doing. Your mind's doing something similar as well, your ego. The ego is always looking round for threats to its own image, threats to its image of itself. There's a lot of automatic things going on in the mind and the body. I became aware of my posture changing as I'm walking down the hill. The type of tree changes here as well. There's more evergreen and pine trees, so you notice that the light level changes as well. There's more light here. And all the time I'm doing this, I'm not thinking about the world or the state of it. So just for now, all that matters is being quiet in the forest. Have a nice day.